Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all. My name is Camila, and I'm very glad to be moderating this conference today. As you know, one of the main objectives of this global conference of the Sustainable Food Systems Program is to present transformational actions, tools, and initiatives that have emerged since the UN Food Systems Summit, with a view to promote their uptake and upscaling in national and local policymaking processes. Today, we have different profiles and structures of institutions that, each with its own perspective, act on the agenda of food systems in the struggle to make them healthier, more sustainable, and drivers of social justice, gender equity, and other inequalities resulting from large imbalances of power and concentrations of wealth. Based on the following presentations and experiences, we will be able to reflect on some new challenges that are increasingly imposing our daily lives, such as, first, why it's important to connect climate change to malnutrition and modern dietary patterns. Second, is there room for addressing these challenges at the local level? And finally, can policymaking and food systems change at the local level impact transformation in a global scenario? With these questions in mind, I'm pleased to announce our experts that we invited to this meeting. First of all, I would like to introduce them. I would like to introduce, first of all, Janine Coutinho. Janine is a nutritionist. She's in charge of the coordination of the Health and Sustainable Food Program of the Brazilian Institute for Consumer Defense. She holds a PhD in human nutrition from Brasilia's University. She worked at the Brazil Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Social Development, coordinating nutrition teams, as well as the Pan-American Health Organization in Brazil. We also count with Mônica Guerra. Mônica Guerra is a director at Comida do Amanhã Institute, a think tank supporting the transitions towards healthy and sustainable food systems in Brazil. She has more than 10 years of experience working on the Sustainable Development Agenda, with focus on sustainable urban development and on food systems transformation from a holistic perspective, and is a currently PhD candidate in sociology with seats and urban cultures at the University of Coimbra, Portugal, where she investigates urban foodscapes. And finally, Gisele Bortolini, who is a health food promotion coordinator in the National Secretariat of Food and Nutritional Security of the Ministry of Social Development and Assistance, Family and Fight Hunger in Brazil. Her responsibility is to promote health and sustainable food systems. Thank you all again for being here in this conference. If please you have any comments or questions, please feel free to add them in the chat. But please inform who you are and whom you would like to make these questions. I would like to let this first round in order to delimit the main challenges we have in Brazil, but which are also present in most countries. I would like to start with Janine. Janine, from the health and climate emergency perspective, how do you think that all steps that make up food systems, from how our food is produced to when it's consumed in our plates, are contributing to the various negative outcomes? Welcome, Janine.
Thank you, Camila. I'm very happy to be with all of you at this important global conference. Thank you, Camila, and my colleagues for the opportunity to be here. First of all, I would like to say some words about IDEC. IDEC is the Brazilian Institute of Consumer Defense. We are a non-profit consumer association. We fight for consumers' rights. We work in different areas. We work on health, mobility, sustainable consumption, and healthy and sustainable eating. Our program is focused on promoting and defending the human right to adequate food. This is a constitutional right here in Brazil. At IDEC, we fight against the hegemonic food system. That's the way the food is produced, distributed, offered, and finally consumed. And this hegemonic way of this process is leading to sickened population and environment. It accelerates the impacts of climate change and puts at risk the right to adequate food. The hegemonic food system driven by agribusiness have a huge impact on biodiversity and mechanisms that broaden inequality and increased food and nutrition insecurity. It's also important to highlight that climate change is also a health crisis with deep consequences for the health of population, specifically in the most vulnerable populations. So the fight for environment preservation and for the right to healthy and sustainable food is deeply linked to the fight against poverty and for a less unequal and more just world. It's also important to say that these phenomena are not isolated, right? The climate crisis, the food insecurity, and obesity. On the contrary, all these factors are converging. The undernutrition, obesity, and climate change are concurring phenomena that feed each other and share the same determinants. And we call these phenomena global syndemic. Not only climate change affects our diet in many ways, contributing to different outcomes, but also the production, marketing, advertisement, and consumption, in particular, the ultra-processed food, which are produced based on commodities such as soy, corn, sugar, and use high levels of pesticides and have a huge impact in our biodiversity. And we have a lot of important evidence showing the relation between the consumption of ultra-processed food to different kinds of diseases, malnutrition, obesity, and also non-communicable diseases. A recent study held here in Brazil shows that each year, 57,000 deaths are associated to the consumption of ultra-processed food. And at the same time, Brazil continues to break the production records. And we need to highlight that we have every day 33 million people hungry. This is the picture of the global syndemic.
Thank you a lot, Janine. Indeed, the global syndemic is one of the major and has a great dimension when we talk about challenges. And talking about challenges, I would like to invite Monica, asking you, Monica, what do you think cities have a role in addressing these global challenges and local governments?
Thank you, Camila, for the question. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today. So I think we're very honored from in the name of Comida do Amanhã to be able to exchange a little bit these reflections that are so urgent and so important within this event. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you, my colleagues, my friends, and we can support each other. That's so precious. So first, allow me a little bit to speak about Comida do Amanhã Institute. You already mentioned a bit, Camila, but we are a think tank that supports the transition towards sustainable and healthy food systems from an integrated and systemic perspective. So we work in Brazil, and our actions are focused on three main topics. So we work with food in cities, food and climate, food and culture. And within our work, we just designed and coordinated LUPA. There is the biggest lab on urban food policy in the region at this time, a lab that is co-realized with ICLEI, South America, and aims to support cities to develop their food strategies from an integrated, participatory, and systemic perspective, and have a safe space to learn with each other. And we can't also with the precious support of IDEC and SES. And in its second edition, LUPA has already more than 30 cities participating from all the regions in Brazil. So when you ask me about the role of cities and how can we tackle these challenges within the urban context, we are seeing a lot of examples that are happening also in Brazil. But first of all, what I would like to ask and invite everyone to reflect is why food in cities matter to address these global challenges. We need to bring some data here. So cities are home to, at this time, to 70% of all food consumption in the world. At the same time, 70% of all waste related to food happens in cities. And also food accounts for an average of 13% of total greenhouse gas emissions, reaching about 40% of all urban greenhouse gas emissions, and being the main source of these gases in mid-sized cities in developing countries, according to a recent study from 2019 with C40 and the University of Leeds. So the average contribution of food to greenhouse gas emissions is even projected to rise up to 38% as an average by total in 2050. So to speak about food and cities and climate is a completely same topic. We cannot avoid each other. They support each other. So part of the city's role is also to provide the infrastructure and the means for people to thrive. And the new urban agenda from Quito in 2016 is very clear in attesting how cities, they hold the responsibility of guaranteeing the right to food to all its inhabitants. So it's a completely embodied relationship that we have of cities, climate, and food. But although this is turning out to be a bigger and more challenging and more urgent task when we consider the correlation and the worsening of all our contemporary big threats that Giannini just mentioned, climate change, malnutrition, and obesity. And cities, they can, but not even can, they must deploy processes and strategies that recognize their role as key agents of change. They are placed, and they need to place food as central in the debate of climate change adaptation and mitigation within the right to food framework, to have better cities with better food for people, but also for the planet, and to become more resilient. And this is something that we saw while we passed through the pandemic of COVID-19, how cities need to be more resilient within their own food systems. In LUPA, we have seen that this laboratory that we are running in Brazil, that cities are very committed with this agenda. They are gradually recognizing its strategic role within urban systems as a whole. And the cities want to do more and they want to do better. And this is an agenda that is growing attention among local agendas everywhere. And we also must acknowledge something that I think it's really important. The debate on food security, it has a new geography. For a long time, it was an exclusive debate on the availability and stability of food. So it was pretty much related to the rural agenda. But now it is seen as a complex agenda. It's not enough for us to allow and to bring availability and stability of food, but we need also to guarantee access, utilization, agency, and sustainability of the whole food system. And considering this new review that we have of the food security agenda, this brings a new geography. So this brings the lens that the role of cities, they have as being absolutely crucial and central to address food security. So cities, they can design strategies that address the food system in all of its phases. If we see it from a magnifying lens point of view, they can do things from production to waste on the whole chain, and they can have impact in all of the chain. In these strategies, they need necessarily to be built from an integrated, territorialized, and participatory process. So the challenge is pretty complex. What we are seeing as global challenges, they are extremely complex, but they can also be located. And when they are located and we see them from a local perspective, they have completely different shapes. They have completely different challenges and possibilities for resolution. So it needs to be a territorialized approach that cities must have. The strategies, they need to be sensitive to place and to have people's interesting practices at this center. So we are talking about an urban food sensitive planning that needs to address place and people together. And some strategies that may address the urban food challenges from inclusive, integrated, territorialized perspectives, as we are mentioning, they can both shift practices or shift behavior. They can have midterm or long-term impact. So we can think about, for instance, strategies for more inclusive food systems and to drive sustainable food production and distribution if you look into circular urban food strategies. So if you look at strategies that cities can have that can look at the chain as a whole and to improve better production systems, but also in the whole chain, and also to see waste as a possibility to improve the production within the urban perimetry, but also in peri-urban areas. But cities also, they can promote short food supply chains, and that's even the topic of our event today. So cities can support that food is closer, that people are closer to the place where food is produced. And this can have huge impacts, not only on greenhouse gas emissions, but also in the valorization of biodiversity, of local biodiversity and local cultures. At the same time, to bring this into urban agroecology strategies and to see agroecology as a topic that can tackle a lot of issues and can be multidimensional in cities, not only about production, but about inclusion, but about soil permeation. So we have a lot of things that can be related to urban agroecology as a strategy for shifting food systems within the city demand and the city allowing. So we also can have inclusive food programs that can connect the demands for availability of food with inputs for better production practices. We can go a little bit deeper on this after, but the power of food purchasing, of public purchasing, of public procurement within the food system is crucial in cities. So they can be drivers of change, but also strategies to promote healthy and sustainable food environments. And we can get in detail. So cities can really do a lot of things when we think about shifting practices, but also shifting behavior, because we know that there are a lot of mental models among what we think about what is good food for all. So cities, they can have strategies on food and nutrition education, but also on campaigns and shifting food environments. So we have a lot of things that cities can do. I should say that they are eager to doing it. They are very committed to do something, and they are supporting each other. So we are seeing a lot of interesting things that is happening at the local level that can be replicated or that can be scalable, but they can have impact locally and widely. So yeah, cities, they need to be in the middle of the center. If you don't put cities in the center of the table won't change itself. That's what I would say.
Thank you a lot. Janine talked to us about the global perspective of the global syndemic. And you have said to us about the local role, the cities as a key place, a key geography where this challenge must be tackled. But in between, we'll have the national governments. And taking that in mind, I would like to invite Gisele and ask you, Gisele, what is the role of national governments and national policymaking for addressing these challenges? Are there room for multi-level action?
Good morning, Camila. Good evening, good night. Thanks for having me. I'm Gisele Bortolini. I'm the Health Food Promotion Coordinator and the Minister of Social Development, Assistance, Family, and Fly Gas Hunger here in Brazil. And I have been working with public health and food insecurity policies for more than 50 years. First, I'd like to thank the organizers, IDEC, Comida da Amanhã, Instituto Clima, Sociedade, for this side event, for joining force today on such an important issue. I will briefly address the Brazil context from a public policy perspective. Unfortunately, Brazil has returned to the foul hunger map. In last years, we have observed an increase in food and nutrition security in our country. And according to Vigisan, that is a survey carried out by the civil society in 2022, 125,000 Brazilians showed some degree of food and nutrition insecurity, and 33 million of them were in severe food insecurity. That is, people that are really facing hunger. It's important to say that the concept of food and nutrition insecurity in Brazil includes the quantitative and qualitative restrictions of food. As a result, we have observed in Brazil an increase in all forms of malnutrition that includes undernutrition, obesity, and micronutrient deficiency, such as anemia and vitamin A in some regions of Brazil. The double O multiple burden of malnutrition is now faced as a problem with relevant and common causes and determinants. In addition, the global syndemic of obesity is also highlights that there is a close link between nutrition outcomes, climate change, and food systems. Thus, policy actions have to shift from individual approach to policy governance involving many different sectors. So, it's time to act. The Lula's government has the great challenge of recomposing the budget to social public policies, mainly to food and nutrition policies, and reconstructing of pre-existing food and nutrition policies. But it is also necessary to promote advance, synergy, and new arrangements to establish a health food system. We have started with the reconstructions of pre-existent food and nutrition policies, like the recreations of the National Council for Food and Nutrition Security that we call CONSEA. It's a place for the civil society participations and food and nutrition public policies. We are also planning the 6th National Conference on Food and Nutrition Security. That is where the civil society can set priorities, and as a result of the conference, and the result of the conference will be the base for new National Food and Nutrition Security Plan. The last plan ended in 2019. We recreated the interministerial group for the governance of the food and nutrition security policies. That is an important space to discuss the governance of public policies, nutrition food security public policies. And nowadays, 24 ministries are part of this group. The interministerial group is now responsible for organize the Programa Brasil Sem Fome, or No Hunger in Brazil program. It will bring together actions from all sectors. As structural actions, the Brazilian government has increased the value of minimum wage and has increased the value of the Bolsa Família program, that is our cash transfer direct to families. But I'd like to highlight two important advances in 2023 that have relations with short circuits and sustainable foods. The first is our Brazilian school food program. It plays an important role in food and nutrition security by reaching 30 million children and adolescents from public schools in the country. We have increased the financial amounts transferred to municipalities to the cities for purchase of food. The programs is a great example of coordinated policies by setting healthy and culturally adapted nutrition standards for meals. Besides, these programs involve family farmers. It is mandatory that at least 30% of the food for the program need to be buy from the local farmers. The programs offers meals according to our guide, our Brazilian guide of food and nutrition recommendations that prioritize the consumptions of in natura or minimally processed food and limits the offers of ultra-processed foods. Another program that was restarted in the current government is the food acquisition program, and that through this program, the federal government buys products from family farming and distributes them to institutions that serve socially vulnerable groups like popular restaurants, community kitchens, food banks, hospitals, and prisons. In 2023, the amount available to buy products from family farming in these programs is $100 million, and the programs will focus on expanding productions from indigenous communities, Black women, and other Native people. And a new feature in this program is that the mandatory participations of women has increased from 40% to 50%. Another characteristic is that the participations of the representatives from the civil society in these programs is now mandatory, as it was before. This and other many actions to promote the family farm food productions until the food health consumptions will be a part of the new government program called Brasil Without Hunger. Thank you.
That is increasingly good to hear what you said to us after so many years. Okay, but I would like to go back to you, Janine. Could you please give us an example from the Brazilian perspective, Brazilian experience of policies to promote better nutrition and health while at the same time addressing the climate emergency?
Camila, what a challenging question, right? Especially because we passed through difficult years, right? We passed through 6 very difficult years. So, as you know, as we already said, Brazil is one of the biggest food producers, or better saying, commodities producers, right? We produce on a large scale with intensive use of pesticide, monoculture, livestock. All of these direct contribute to the climate change. And that's why we advocate for structural changes through policies and encouraging the production of healthy food, and also related to our food culture that is enormous here in Brazil, local culinary traditions, and policies that promote the consumption of healthy food. And we are really convinced that it's not possible to move forward without strengthening key regulatory policies. And Brazil and Latin America has been recognized by these regulatory policies, right? We have experience on the Brazilian dietary guidelines, the front of package labeling, the school feeding national program, the food purchase program. But all of these policies and programs were weakened, were destroyed in the recent years. And now we are looking for real solutions based on our past experience and taking in account the climate change. We are now starting to rebuild from a fresh perspective of food system, focus also on the climate change. We are pushing and working together with different sectors of the civil society, academia, government, to ensure that all citizens have access to real food. I invite you all to access and read the agenda for action, right? IDEC is very concerned about the false solutions that the big food industry is providing to the population with a healthy and sustainable narrative. One example is the solution that we find in the market about the plant-based food that in many times are they are ultra-processed food. Another special point and policy that Monica mentioned here, and it's very, very important to respond for this situation, is to face the climate change and food and nutrition security, focus on the agroecological transition. We know that agroecologic is known for this approaching agriculture holistic, and it's a cultural, socially fair, and economic viable. Finally, talking about good experiences, good policies, I think it's very important to highlight that it's essential to have a clear governance structure for policies related to the food system, preferably based on legislation, regulation, and clear mechanisms for the social participation. So everyone could be heard and present their perspectives, taking account the consideration. In addition, I think it's also very important to look at the conflict of interests. We should delimit the participation of the private sector so the decisions could not guide the positions of the private sector could not guide the public interest. This is a very sensible topic for IDEC. We are increasingly seeing how the big industry and large corporations are entering in the policy-making spaces. IDEC 2 years ago called a lot of attention for the UN Food System Summit. We really believe that we had a conflict of interest management mechanisms, and we would like to highlight this situation. And I also invite all of you to read our manifesto to healthy and sustainable food system that Colanza, our community of practice, published on 2021 about the Food System Summit.
Thank you a lot, Janine. I'd like to go back to you, Monica, and ask you if you can give us more detailed information about, from your perspective and from the Brazilian background, as Monica, as Gisele highlighted, what policies local governments can implement to shape healthy and sustainable environments? How to integrate the local context to the national and the international ones? Thank you.
Thank you, Camila. I think that it's actually important to mention, because there are people there, they're probably watching us from different countries, that we have a history and a robust story of governance on food systems in Brazil. So it's a benchmark. We've been losing some things in the last 6 years, we know that, but we've been losing them because we had them. And there was such a benchmark all over the world. So we have a governance structure of the overall food and nutrition security system, national, wild, so for the whole country, that has a connection with the local level and the state level. So this makes that everything that happens at the local level, it has a direct relation with what happens at the federal level. So when we think about these programs like the school feeding programs, the program of acquisition of food that Gisele just mentioned, and that Janine was bringing also the agroecology strategies, they are related to federal guidelines. And this is so important to understand that every project that we have, and we have extremely successful examples in cities. We have cities that are just on the front line of showing up to the world what is happening worldwide. So Belo Horizonte is really widely mentioned. Curitiba is widely mentioned. So we have cities that are really doing different, but they are also doing different because we have this governance structure that allows them to do different and allows them to have a more inclusive approach. So being said that, I would like to go a little bit more in detail on things that are happening already. And I think that could be some sort of listed, so we can be benchmarked for other cities as well. But I should say that one size doesn't fit it all. So each city has to find their own solutions because each city has to find their own diagnosis. So each city, we can speak about agroecology, but if you are in the middle of the desert, how can we actually tackle that? So what agroecology means is different depending on the city where we are. When we think about public purchasing, it's different depending on the city where we are. So I should say that every example that we can bring, we always have this sensitiveness of not bringing it as being the golden bullet. So with the silver bullet, we don't have the silver bullet for everything. So just to point that each city has their own characteristics and their own challenges. But I should say that when we think about, for instance, the role that public food procurement can have, and this usually happens in cities, we have the examples like the school feeding program, but also not only in schools, the capacity of cities that have to support sustainable and healthy food systems in other food public purchases. We know that the institutional structure of a municipality is huge. We're thinking about hospitals. We are thinking about prisons. We are thinking about the municipal departments. So all of this consumes food. So we need to see cities and municipal structures as major drivers of consumption, and they can help farmers to have more stable commercialization chains and markets. And cities, they must have and use their institutional purchasing as a strategy for a system change, because it's a huge market. So how can cities have a policy of purchasing and how they choose their food providers from a perspective that can help a system shift? Second, when we think about urban and peri-urban agriculture and agroecology in cities. So first, we're thinking about driving through consumption, but we also can drive through production systems. So urban and peri-urban agriculture, for instance, and agroecology, they must be seen from its multiple benefits. So when cities, they look and they try to design policy focusing on agroecology, how can they make it within a comprehensive lens and to develop projects that can dialogue with both adaptation and mitigation to climate change, so from an environmental benefit. And this, I mean, the power that agroecology initiatives in urban agriculture can have on increasing soil permeability, urban biodiversity, urban ecosystem services, urban food and water nexus. So we are not talking here about water provision, but we have a big issue of water provision in cities. And when we think about urban agroecology, it can tackle also these topics, but also to bring access to healthy food, the increase and generate of income and employment to more vulnerable communities and populations within cities, to support mental health. There are some cities that are in Lupa that they've been saying that, how actually urban agroecology and agriculture in the times of the pandemic of COVID-19 was so important for mental health. So we need to think it in a multiple benefit perspective, but also to bring resilience of the local supply chain, the promotion of local and short circuits, local economic development, and decentralization of the value chain. What Janine was mentioning is going against the business as usual. How can we, through agroecological initiatives locally, we can distribute power and we can distribute the value chain and decentralize this value chain so more people can have access to resources. But also we can have pedagogical function. We have a lot of policies that use urban agroecology and urban agriculture related to the school feeding programs in schools. So children can have access and raise awareness about the relationship they have with food. We need to reframe our relationship with food in urban scenarios because we lost the connection with the food system. And we can have policies that can bring that back. And also the preservation of local practices. So if we look at agroecology from an urban resilience perspective, we can have a lot of impacts and a lot of co-benefits. But also when we think about the circular food systems initiatives that I was mentioning before, the importance that cities have to actually test solutions, to support innovation, to look at projects from cradle to cradle within the food system, and to have this circular overview of the whole urban system. So to have projects like on the reduction of food waste, on shortening supply chains, supporting civil society initiatives. We have seen some initiatives that happen in cities where the farmers are related, they create social currencies, where actually you can bring back your food waste, and this food waste can give you money. So you can go to a street market, to a street food market, and you can purchase your food in exchange of your food waste. So see that your food waste actually has value. And how can the city promote the circulation of value that happens within the whole food chain? But also when we need to see how cities can actually be more committed and compromised to include food within their climate adaptation and mitigation plans and projects. And this is something that I think that we are just starting to scratch. So how can food be included in the diagnosis, the monitoring and evaluation, and see it as critical to urban resilience from both adaptation and mitigation perspectives? We've seen that there have been some debates on the use of concept of nature-based solutions versus agroecology. So how can we actually put these together? And how can we have food as being part of the climate strategies of the cities? But also cities can promote healthy and sustainable food environments. And by that, I mean to give access to better food within cities and to tackle these big challenges of accessing food. So how can cities actually monitor and evaluate and work towards fighting against food deserts, food apartheid, food swamps? And this can be done through food markets, to the implementation of food markets in vulnerable areas, access to food in schools, marketing regulation in public spaces, etc. So we can really, cities have a lot to do when we think about regulating food environments. But all of this by saying that we need to actually, cities need to look at food and to develop robust, systemic, participatory food strategies. Because from the point of view and from the perspective that you do that, and you listen to your civil society, and that you recognize the actors, they are already doing things. The stakeholders, they are building the foodscape of this specific place in this city, and you bring them to the table, the solutions will arise. So I should say that the main policy that cities can have is actually to have an inclusive and comprehensive governance structure that can bring the solutions that are already in the field, and that can put it on the place, people that actually can take action and can move forward. So how cities can be facilitators of processes that are already happening on the field and support civil society to do better with the resources that the municipality can bring them. So we have a lot of examples, and we could be here the whole day bringing all what cities are doing. We have amazing experiences that are happening worldwide, in Brazil, but also in Latin America and other countries in the world. But I just wanted to pick some of them, and it's almost randomly picked. So I just try to show how cities can support from specific policies, both production, retail and distribution, consumption models and behavior, and they can do that all integrated. So yeah, we really, as you can see, we really don't doubt on the power of cities and on the power that they can do to shift the whole food system, but definitely related with a global agenda that can put this in first place. So I should remember that actually it was only on COP26 that for the first time urban food systems was being brought to the table at COP. So this is a long way that we still have ahead of us. In COP28 we had the first pavilion on food systems, and we really need to put food in the middle of the debate of climate change, but we also need to bring climate into the debate that we have on access to healthy and sustainable food systems. Because that, when we think about just transition on climate, on the climate agenda, we need to bring the universal right to food as being mandatory and as being almost our filter on how can we do this transition, taking people into account and taking human rights into account. So thank you.
Wow, incredible. You said that from what I heard from what you said is that cities can do it. They are able to do it. What we need is a political will and good governance and good tools, good incentives. And talking about good incentives and good tools, I would like to go to you, Gisele, and ask you, could you tell what are the goals and targets of the current Brazilian federal government for supporting short circuits and sustainable and health diets, considering that what Monica said, Brazil has already a good governance structure able to provide in cities these good tools?
Yes, we have many challenges ahead. We need to focus on different ways to guarantee human right to adequate and health food for all Brazilians. If we special emphasis on the health component, and we think that state must coordinate and induce the transformations of the existing food systems into a healthier, sustainable, and resilient food systems. And we think that the state must improve the governance of food and nutrition security policies at the federal, state, and municipal levels, or in the cities, to and guarantee the participation of the civil society. So this structure is very important because we need to expand the supply, availability, and consumptions of healthy and sustainable foods through public policies for productions, processing, distributions, and consumptions, according to the National Food Guide for the Brazilian population, ensure better health and nutrition for all Brazilians. I think that we have a big challenge that is use our National Food Guide for Brazilian population to induce all public policies in Brazil. In addition, it is necessary to ensure actions and practices for a new cycle of food and nutrition security policies focus on climate crisis and on production, supply, consumptions of foods that really contribute to the health for the Brazilian population and to the planet. We need to consider this point. To respond to these discussions, recently we have started building a national strategy to promote food and nutrition security in urban areas by integrating actions of production, supply, and consumptions of health foods in the cities. We have many interesting initiatives at local level, like Monica told us in Brazil, and we will use this experience to the constructions of the national strategy to promote health cities. So we hope to share successful experience about this new strategy soon. And I take this opportunity to reaffirm our Brazilian commitments to the healthy and sustainable food systems agenda, to the food and nutrition security, and to the human right to adequate food. So we have many challenges, and we think that we can work together to reduce the food and nutrition security and build a healthier food system in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Gisele. We have time for one question, and I would like to bring Sabrina's question that she did in the chat. And I'd like to ask both of you to react to this question and also make your final remarks while doing that, okay? So I'll just read Sabrina's question. She asks, as you know, different cities have different challenges, hence different interventions need to be implemented. How does national level monitor this? How does the national level monitor the success of these policies? So feel free to answer to this question, and also I'd like to ask you to make your final remarks. Thank you. Janine, can you start, please?
So maybe I can answer in the social organization perspective, right? The consumers should be aware, right, about the implementation of these different challenges. I think it's very important to communicate to the different audiences, to the consumers, to citizens, what are the policies focus on these different cities, right? It's people need to be aware what is being done in the cities. People need to present their perspectives, right? And my final remarks, I just want to be at this conference. IDEC keep on working to the right to food, keep on working to fight for better and adequate food for all citizens, for all consumers. We need to rebuild food and nutrition policies here in Brazil in a new perspective, on a refreshed perspective, taking into account the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Janine. Monica?
So thank you for the question. I think that even Giselle would be the best person to speak from the federal government, but I think there would be a long answer for that. We have, as I was mentioning, a robust system of governance. So when we say that there are policies that come from the federal government to state government to the municipal level, we also have structures that happen. So we have an intersectorial, interministerial space in the federal government, but also it's supposed to be on the state government and municipal government. And there are conferences, and there are also councils with civil society involved. So all these structures, they have different roles within the whole system of food security and nutrition. So there was being built since 2010. I think it's a law from 2010, but since 2014, I think that it has been a monitoring of the food security and nutrition and state of art in the cities, in the cities, in the states, and at the federal government. So this mapping that was happening, this diagnosis, it was called Mapassan. It was a way for the federal government to understand what was the level of food insecurity and nutrition, and how the programs that were coming from the federal government but implemented locally, they were being successfully. So yeah, there is a structure for this monitoring, but also it must be, each city has to have their own structures and their own conferences and their own spaces of evaluation and monitoring. So I recognize your question that cities, they have different challenges and different interventions need to be implemented. For instance, in Brazil, we have more than 50,000 cities. So it's a lot of cities that there is in a country. It's a continental country. So you have structures that don't happen only from the federal government, but they happen also from the state government and from the municipal government itself. So I should pass the word to Giselle, because I think she must be the person that has the biggest answers for that, on how it's going to happen from now on and how the things are this time, because we know that there was an implosion of a lot of structures that happened, and this Mapassan was one of those that were just stopped. We didn't have updates of that in the last years, but I truly believe that these monitoring systems, they also be taking part of the new policies that are being designed now in this new government. So it should pass to her. But just to say that we have a complex governance structure, and it takes into account not only the diagnosis and the design of the policies and the plans, but also the monitoring and evaluation. And this is being considered within the overall design of this big program and policy structure.
Thank you a lot, Monica. Gisele?
Yes, we will have a new Mapassan, but in Brazil, we have many different surveys at national level that can help us to monitoring the food productions, the food consumptions, and the nutritional status. So we can use these surveys to monitor the evaluations of the new policies that we will launch it in this government. And we have national survey to monitor the food insecurity that will occur in next year. So we will have data from through monitoring the food insecurity and food consumptions and nutritional status. So this is important to the public policies. And to end, I'd like to thank the opportunity to share and listen this important discussion. We have a great challenge in Brazil, and to reduce the food insecurity again, because Brazil returned to foul hunger. But we have great challenge to reduce the insecurity with health for Brazilian population and with health to the planet. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Janine, Gisele, and Monica. One thing that we may affirm after this discussion, we have the political will, we have the tools, we have everything we need to go on and to make the difference and make the change that is needed. So thank you a lot for your participation. As always, we learned a lot from you, and thank a lot for the opportunity to implement and provide this meeting, this webinar. I would like to end this webinar giving you some videos that sum up all of the discussion that we have made today very well. Thank you a lot. Have a great day, a great night, a great evening to you all. Bye-bye.
Vivemos hoje uma sindemia global que é a coexistência de 3 crises: fome, obesidade e mudanças climáticas. Nos últimos anos, esse cenário se agravou com a pandemia de Covid-19. Estamos falando sobre os maiores desafios para a sociedade e o meio ambiente. E a solução passa pela transição dos sistemas alimentares. É sobre a maneira com que os alimentos são produzidos, distribuídos, ofertados, comercializados e consumidos. O IDEC, Instituto Brasileiro de Defesa do Consumidor, criou uma agenda de ação que aponta caminhos de transição para sistemas alimentares saudáveis e sustentáveis. Para entender essa agenda, veja quais são as 5 dimensões dos sistemas alimentares: negócios, abastecimento e demandas, ecológica, saúde e governança. Quando falamos de negócios, precisamos incentivar organizações que não estejam focadas somente na produção, lucro e exportação de commodities. Medidas legislativas devem enfrentar o monopólio e promover a agricultura familiar. Agroecologia, produção de diferentes culturas e cadeias curtas de abastecimento são fundamentais. O Estado precisa garantir o acesso tanto físico quanto financeiro das pessoas a alimentos saudáveis. Precisamos de uma política nacional de abastecimento de alimentos. Vamos fortalecer o papel regulador do Estado na formação de preços, na inclusão de critérios de saúde pública e na definição de tributos e inflação sobre os alimentos. Aqui falamos sobre a importância de preservar os recursos naturais e os biomas brasileiros, inclusive para poder enfrentar as mudanças climáticas. Práticas agropecuárias de baixo impacto ambiental são fundamentais. Ao mesmo tempo, precisamos reduzir o uso de agrotóxicos e recuperar áreas improdutivas. Queremos um modelo de produção saudável e sustentável para as pessoas e o planeta. Quando se trata de saúde, é imprescindível disseminar o Guia Alimentar para a População Brasileira, instrumento de educação alimentar e nutricional baseado em evidências científicas. Para garantir a saúde das pessoas, é importante restringir a publicidade infantil, aprimorar a rotulagem de alimentos, taxar as bebidas açucaradas e desincentivar o consumo de ultraprocessados. brasileiros. Governança tem relação clara com a defesa do direito humano à alimentação adequada, a defesa do marco legal brasileiro e o restabelecimento do Sistema Nacional de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional junto ao Conselho Nacional de Segurança Alimentar e Nutricional é imprescindível para garantir a efetividade de políticas públicas de alimentação com a participação social. Precisamos prevenir conflitos de interesses e a interferência da indústria em decisões de políticas públicas. Este é um chamado para a ação. Governos, sociedade civil, movimentos sociais, academia e diversos outros setores devem atuar de forma convergente e articulada. E os caminhos para promover a saúde da população e do planeta estão na agenda para a ação. O IDEC já está em ação. Quer saber mais? Acesse o link na descrição.
Vocês já pararam para pensar na importância das cidades como agentes de solução de sistemas alimentares? Um dos principais desafios, principalmente para as cidades mais urbanizadas, é garantir sistemas alimentares sustentáveis e uma dieta saudável para todos os seus habitantes.
E por ser um direito, o acesso à alimentação precisa ser garantido por políticas públicas envolvendo diversos setores e disciplinas. Governos municipais e organizações locais são atores indispensáveis nesse ecossistema da transformação. E dessa convicção germinou o LUPA, o Laboratório Urbano de Políticas Públicas Alimentares. A primeira edição do LUPA realizou 9 oficinas e 6 seminários.
Quero começar já desejando boas-vindas para todos e todas.
Bom dia.
Wanda Maia, Santarém, no Pará.
Bom dia a todos.
Bom dia.
Foram 35 horas de trabalho imersivo, reunindo mais de 60 representantes, tanto de governo quanto de sociedade civil organizada, das mais de 20 cidades brasileiras selecionadas para o projeto, além das 3 cidades mentoras.
Se nós estamos falando aqui de sistemas alimentares justos, limpos, sustentáveis, a gente precisa trabalhar desde o início.
Se a gente não faz o diálogo com a sociedade, a gente incorre no risco de fazer uma política de cima para baixo.
Essa ideia que vocês estão trabalhando aqui é absolutamente fundamental, trabalhar com um plano de segurança alimentar e nutricional, onde a questão da insegurança alimentar seja pensada para além da fome.
E não adianta tirar soluções prontas da prateleira. É preciso ouvir o que as populações realmente demandam e atentar para as experiências que já estão sendo conduzidas. Por isso mesmo, o primeiro Lupa Lab foi um riquíssimo laboratório de troca de experiências.
Nós aprendemos que é na dinâmica destes encontros que colhemos os melhores frutos para a segurança alimentar e nutricional das nossas cidades e podemos, de fato, colocar a comida no centro da mesa da agenda municipal.